Dad, about Saturday night. My son Tyler hesitated on the phone, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. It was 3:15 p.m. on a typical Tuesday afternoon in Seattle, and I was reviewing financial reports in my office when the phone rang. My heart always raced when I saw his name on the screen, not because anything could be wrong. My children were responsible, independent adults, but because our conversations had become distant in recent years. Cordial, but distant. "Hey son, what's up?" I answered, trying to sound relaxed as I closed the spreadsheets on my computer. "I have some amazing news." His voice was brimming with excitement I hadn't heard in a long time. "I got that promotion I told you about. The company approved my transfer to headquarters. I'll be making twice what I make here, Dad." Twice. Jessica is over the moon, and little Emma will be going to an international school. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. I felt a tightness in my chest. The company headquarters was more than 500 miles away. My only granddaughter, whom I already saw so little, would be even further away. But the joy in my son's voice made me swallow my sadness. "That's wonderful, Tyler. I'm very proud of you. When are you moving?" "At the end of the month. I know it's fast, but I can't pass up this opportunity." He paused, and I could hear Jessica saying something in the background. "That's why I want to throw a special farewell dinner. Something fitting for the occasion." My heart warmed. Finally, a family moment to celebrate this achievement. What a lovely idea. "Where will it be?" "At the Golden Terrace." The pride in his voice was evident. Jessica insisted. She said it's the most elegant restaurant in town. She got a reservation for Saturday night. "It'll be perfect." "What time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice natural. "At 8. It'll just be family, me, Jessica, Emma, Marcus, and Linda. Intimate, but elegant. Jessica wants it to be an unforgettable evening." I waited. I waited for him to invite me officially. I waited for him to say, "Obviously you'll be there too, Dad." But the silence stretched on, filled only by distant voices and the sound of papers being shuffled. "What about me?" The question came out weaker than I would have liked. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heart beating as I waited for the obvious, natural response any son would give his father. "Oh, Dad." His voice changed completely, becoming uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. "It's just, you know. Jessica has organized something more, how can I put it, more formal. More sophisticated." "Sophisticated?" I repeated, not understanding. "Yeah, Dad. The Golden Terrace is a very fancy place, very upscale. Jessica is afraid you'll feel out of place. You know how these places are, right? Everyone is well dressed, talking about art, expensive wines. Maybe it would be better if you didn't go. It could be a little awkward." His words echoed in my ears like a distorted echo. Awkward. Out of place. Afraid I'd feel inadequate. My own son, whom I had raised with so much love and dedication, was telling me I wasn't classy enough to go to a fancy restaurant. Awkward for whom, Tyler? The question came out colder than I intended. "It's nothing personal, Dad. It's just that, well, you know. It's a different environment. Jessica suggested that maybe we could have lunch on Sunday somewhere more suited to your profile. Somewhere you'd feel more comfortable." Suited to your profile. At ease. As if I were a child who needed to be protected from adult situations. As if I were inadequate to interact with refined people. "I see," my voice came out controlled, but I felt the blood boiling in my veins. "So you think I'm not classy enough for the Golden Terrace?" "Dad, it's not that. It's just that, look, you're amazing the way you are, but we're from different worlds, right? You with your popular restaurants, working since you were young, with that simple way about you. There's nothing wrong with that, but on an occasion like this, with Jessica's friends, people who are more, you understand, people who are more." "More what? More important? More educated? More respectable?" "Of course I understand, son." The words came out calmly, but inside I was devastated. "Have fun." "You're not upset, are you, Dad? It's just that Jessica gets nervous about these things, and I want it to be a perfect night." "I'm not upset," I lied. I was devastated. "Have a great night." I hung up the phone and sat there in my office, staring out the window overlooking downtown Seattle. Below, I could see the elegant facade of the Golden Terrace, with its tinted glass windows and discreet gold lettering. My restaurant. The place I had built with every penny of my savings, every decision carefully considered, every detail designed to create exactly the sophisticated atmosphere my children admired so much. They thought I wasn't classy enough to be there. That it would be embarrassing to take me. That I needed to stay in my place, away from refined people. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. If only they knew. My name is Jonathan, I'm 59 years old, and I just found out that my own children are ashamed of me. If you're enjoying this story of humiliation and twists and turns, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened on Saturday would change how they saw me forever. If they knew that the simple man who embarrassed them so much was actually the owner of the most elegant place in town, they might reconsider who really didn't deserve to be there. But they would find that out in the most devastating way possible. After that devastating phone call, I spent the entire night awake, replaying how we got to this point. How my own children, whom I raised with so much love and sacrifice, became these people who were ashamed of their own father. Tyler had always been the most ambitious of my children. Ever since he was little, when I was just starting out with my first diner in a working-class neighborhood in Seattle, he told me that one day he would have an office downtown. "Dad, I'm going to wear a suit and tie every day," he used to say when he was 10. I would smile and reply, "Of course you will, son. But never forget where you came from." How ironic. He completely forgot. The transformation began when he married Jessica. She came from a traditionally wealthy Seattle family, the kind that has old paintings on the walls and talks about European wineries over dinner. From the first date, I could tell Jessica saw me as a problem to be managed. "Dad, about the wedding," Tyler said nervously 3 months before the ceremony. "Jessica thought it would be best if you didn't bring anyone from the diner. You know, it's going to be at a traditional club." Traditional. The first of many code words I learned to decode. The wedding was exactly as Jessica planned, elegant, expensive, and cold. I felt like an extra in my own son's life, sitting at a side table, politely greeting people who barely spoke to me. During the reception, I overheard Jessica explaining to a friend, "Tyler's dad is a food entrepreneur. He's a hard worker, poor thing, but you know how it is. He comes from a more humble background." Poor thing. More humble background. As if my struggle to give them the best was something to be ashamed of. Marcus, my younger son, followed his older brother's example. When he married Linda 2 years later, she was different at first. A teacher, from a simpler background, without Jessica's aristocratic arrogance. I thought it would be different. And it was, for about 6 months. Soon Linda began frequenting the same circles as Jessica, attending high society lunches, gradually adopting her sister-in-law's codes of behavior. "Father-in-law about Christmas," she said to me on the phone a few months after she got married. "Jessica suggested we do something more intimate this year. More modern." Modern meant without the inappropriate father-in-law. What hurt me most was seeing how they reinterpreted our family history. Little by little, my heroic struggle to raise 2 children practically alone, my wife had died when Tyler was 12 and Marcus 10, became just an embarrassing detail from the past. They preferred the edited version, 2 talented young men who overcame adversity and got where they were on their own merit. I, the protagonist of the struggle, became an inconvenient appendix they preferred to keep in the background. But what they didn't know was how I had really built my empire. It all started with a 20-square-meter diner in a working-class neighborhood. I would wake up at 4 in the morning to make sandwiches and coffee for construction workers. Every penny that came in was carefully reinvested. Within 5 years, I had 3 diners. Within 10, a small chain that served the entire Seattle metropolitan area. But I always had a bigger vision. 15 years ago, when I saw the ad that the Golden Terrace was for sale, I knew it was my chance. Seattle's most prestigious restaurant, frequented by the local elite, was going bankrupt due to mismanagement. The previous owners were society people who knew expensive wine but didn't know anything about business. I used my entire life savings, took out heavy loans, and bought the establishment. In the early years, I almost went bankrupt 3 times. But I applied everything I had learned in the diners: quality, impeccable service, and competent management. I turned Golden Terrace into a phenomenon. Today, it's impossible to get a reservation less than 2 months in advance. Business people close $1 million deals there. Traditional families celebrate birthdays. Young couples propose marriage. It's where Seattle's elite gather, and for all those years, I kept my name out of the spotlight. Few knew that the owner was Jonathan Miller, the same man who started out selling sandwiches on the street. To my children, I was still just the father who worked in food, as Tyler liked to introduce me. When they asked about my schedule or why I was always busy, I told them I was expanding the business or dealing with suppliers. "Dad, you shouldn't work so hard at your age," Marcus commented on a recent visit. "A diner is a tiring business." If they only knew that at 59, I was running the most sophisticated establishment in town. The most ironic thing was hearing them occasionally comment on the Golden Terrace. "Jessica wants to celebrate our wedding anniversary there," Tyler said once. "But it's hard to get a reservation. They say the place has become an obsession among high society." "It must be expensive," I said, feigning disinterest. "Yeah, but it's worth it. Maybe one day we'll get a table." Maybe, I thought to myself, smiling inside. That night, as I looked at the illuminated facade of my restaurant from my office window, I made a decision that would change everything forever. On Saturday, I would be at the Golden Terrace. Not as the inadequate father who should have stayed home, but as the owner of the establishment. It was time for my children to discover that the man they had so underestimated had built the very place they admired most in the city. If you're following this story of a turnaround, stay tuned because the lesson they would learn would be devastating. I picked up the phone and dialed the restaurant. "Golden Terrace, good evening. Carlos speaking." "Carlos, it's Jonathan. We need to talk about Saturday night." "Carlos, it's Jonathan. We need to talk about Saturday night," I said into the phone, my voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside. "Sure, Mr. Miller. Is there a problem with the Mendez family reservation?" The Mendez family. Jessica had made the reservation under her last name, not mine. They didn't even want to associate that with me. "Not exactly a problem, Carlos. It's my family. My children and daughters-in-law. They told me I would be inappropriate to attend our restaurant." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Carlos had been working with me for 5 years, since he took over as general manager. He knew how hard I had worked to make the Golden Terrace what it was today. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, this is absurd. You built this place." "I know, Carlos. That's why I'm going to show up there on Saturday. Not as a guest, but as the owner. And I want it to be a complete surprise." I spent the rest of the week reliving how our family had reached this breaking point. After my wife died of cancer almost 20 years ago, I made a promise in the hospital. My children would have the best opportunities possible, even if it cost me my own life. I worked 18 hours a day to keep that promise. I woke up at 4 in the morning to prepare food at diners, spent my afternoons visiting suppliers and investors, and my evenings studying business and culinary arts in online courses. Tyler and Marcus grew up seeing this absolute dedication. "Dad, why do you work so hard?" Tyler asked me when he was 14, when he found me asleep over accounting books at the kitchen table. "Because I want you to have a better future, son. And a better future is built with work and study." They saw my transformation from diner owner to restaurant entrepreneur. I paid for their private universities, bought their first cars, and paid for their apartments during college. When they got married, they were both completely financially independent. But somewhere in the middle of that process, something changed. The transformation began subtly. Tyler stopped asking me for career advice. Marcus started making jokes about my straightforward way of speaking. At family gatherings, I noticed exchanged glances when I told stories about the diners. "Dad, maybe it's better not to talk about work at dinner," Tyler told me at one of Jessica's birthday parties. "People here don't really understand that business." That business. As if feeding people was something lesser, less worthy of conversation. The exclusion intensified after the weddings. Jessica implemented subtle but clear rules about social events. "It's going to be a more sophisticated affair, father-in-law," she would say whenever I wasn't invited to some important celebration. "People more in our circle, you know." Linda, who seemed different at first, soon adapted to Jessica's standards. "Father-in-law, about Emma's christening," she said nervously a few months ago. "The ceremony will be at the Episcopal Church downtown. Then there will be a party at the club. Jessica thought it would be better to do something more intimate." Intimate without Grandpa. What hurt me most was seeing how they edited our history for their social circles. I became my father who works in food, instead of my father who built a culinary empire. My heroic struggle to raise them alone became just more humble origins. At family events, when I tried to participate in conversations about economics or business, I was met with condescending smiles and quick changes of subject. "Dad, these macroeconomic issues are more complex," Marcus said at a Christmas gathering. "It's not just about the cost of ingredients." Ingredient costs. As if my understanding of economics was limited to wholesale shopping. The worst was when they needed money. Down payments on new cars, home renovations, expensive schools for Emma. They knew exactly where to find me. But when it came to including me in important events, I became the inconvenient relative. "Dad, about Marcus's MBA graduation," Tyler called me months ago. "The ceremony will be very formal. Afterwards, dinner at Sakura. Jessica thought you might feel a little out of place. They're all senior executives, very technical conversations." Out of place at my own son's graduation dinner. It was during that call that I made a silent decision. I was tired of being treated like a problem to be managed. I was tired of having my intelligence questioned, my experience diminished, my presence considered inappropriate. They thought I wasn't refined enough to understand elaborate cuisine. That I was embarrassing to sophisticated social circles. That my opinion didn't matter on complex issues. In fact, while they underestimated me, I was quietly building the very place they admired most in town. That week passed at a strange speed. During the day, I functioned on autopilot, visiting restaurants, taking care of administrative issues, meeting with suppliers. But my mind was completely focused on Saturday. On Friday, Tyler called me one last time. "Dad, about tomorrow, you're not upset, are you?" "It's just that Jessica was a little nervous about having so many people over." "I'm not upset, son," I lied with a calmness that surprised me. "Have fun. We can have lunch on Sunday if you want. Somewhere quieter." "Sure. Have a great night." When I hung up, I looked out my office window at the elegant facade of the Golden Terrace. In a few hours, my children would discover that the man they considered unfit to frequent upscale establishments was actually the owner of the most elegant restaurant in Seattle. If you're following this story of humiliation and redemption, stay tuned, because the lesson they would learn on Saturday would be devastating and would forever change our family dynamic. It was time to show Tyler and Marcus that the simple father who embarrassed them so much had much more to offer than they ever imagined. And they would find out in the most shocking way possible. Golden Terrace, good evening. Carlos speaking. "Carlos, it's Jonathan. We need to talk about Saturday night. I have a very specific plan for my family." I spent the next hour on the phone with Carlos, organizing every detail of what would be the most revealing night of our family's lives. It wasn't just about humiliating my kids, it was about showing them who I really was. "I want you to treat the Mendez family table like any other VIP reservation," I explained carefully. "Impeccable service, but nothing that reveals my connection to the restaurant. When I arrive around 9 o'clock, I want you to greet me as you always do when I come in to take care of administrative matters." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Miller. What about the moment of revelation?" "Leave that to me. I just need you to be prepared to confirm my identity when I reveal who I am." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over in my mind how I had gotten there, how a man who started out selling sandwiches on the street had become the owner of the most prestigious establishment in Seattle. The journey hadn't been easy. After my wife died, when Tyler was 12 and Marcus was 10, I promised myself that they would have every opportunity one never had. I worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, building first one diner, then 3, then a small chain. But I always dreamed bigger. 15 years ago, when I read in the newspaper that the Golden Terrace was for sale, I knew it was my chance to prove that I understood true hospitality. The restaurant was going out of business because the previous owners, despite all their aristocratic education, didn't understand the basics, treating people well. I used every penny of my savings, mortgaged the snack bars, and took out loans that gave me nightmares. In the first 2 years, I almost went bankrupt 3 times. I slept in the restaurant office more nights than I did at home. Tyler and Marcus thought I was just expanding the snack bar business. The secret to success wasn't just money, it was applying everything I learned serving construction workers to the world of fine dining. Impeccable quality, warm but respectful service, attention to the details that make a difference. Within 5 years, Golden Terrace became the most sought-after place in Seattle. There was a 3-month waiting list for reservations. Businesspeople flew in from other cities just to close deals there. The mayor celebrated his re-election in our private dining room. And during all that time, I remained anonymous. Few knew that Jonathan Miller, the owner of the popular diners, was also the owner of the most sophisticated restaurant in the area. To my children, I was still just the dad who works with food. On Thursday, I called my personal tailor. I need my best suit for Saturday. Something that conveys authority without being ostentatious. On Friday, I visited each of my diners, talking to employees who had worked with me for years. Some knew about the Golden Terrace, others didn't. But they all knew that I had never lost my humility, even with success. "Mr. Miller," said Rosa, who had worked in the kitchen of the first diner for 15 years, "you seem different today. More determined." "Tomorrow is an important day, Rosa. I'm going to teach a lesson I should have taught a long time ago. If you've been following this journey of humiliation and discovery, stay tuned, because the lesson my children would learn about underestimating people would be unforgettable." Saturday morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock, as usual. But this time, instead of going straight to the diners, I went to the Golden Terrace to check every detail myself. The tables were immaculately set, the flowers fresh, the lighting perfect. "Nervous, Mr. Miller?" Carlos asked as we reviewed the menu. "Not nervous. Determined." I spent the afternoon mentally preparing myself. I chose every word I would say, imagined every possible reaction. This wasn't about revenge, it was about dignity. It was about showing that the man they considered inadequate had built the very place they admired most. At 7 o'clock, I dressed carefully. A crisp navy suit, silk tie, Italian leather shoes I only wore on special occasions. I looked in the mirror and saw not the simple man my children described, but the successful businessman I had always been. At 8:15, I parked 2 blocks from the Golden Terrace and walked over. I could see through the lighted windows that the restaurant was full, as it always was on Saturday nights. My family was sitting at the center table, exactly where Carlos had told me. Tyler looked elegant in a dark suit, Jessica stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Marcus and Linda were also impeccable. Little Emma behaved like a little princess, obviously accustomed to sophisticated surroundings. They were chatting animatedly, toasting with expensive champagne, celebrating the new chapter in Tyler's life. A beautiful, successful, happy family. A family that had decided that the patriarch didn't deserve to be there. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, and headed for the main entrance. It was time for my children to discover that the man they considered embarrassing in sophisticated circles was, in fact, the person who had created the circle they so admired. Carlos greeted me at the door with a discreet nod. A few other customers greeted me respectfully, local businesspeople who knew who I was, traditional families who had been coming to the restaurant for years. It was ironic that in the room where my own children found me inadequate, I was one of the most respected people there. I walked slowly through the room, taking in every detail of the environment I had so carefully crafted. Conversations whispered around me, crystal glasses clinked, classical music played softly. Everything was exactly as I had planned 15 years ago. My family hadn't seen me yet. They were absorbed in their private celebration, oblivious to the fact that the owner of the establishment was just a few feet away. I stopped next to a marble column, where I could watch them without being noticed. The time had come to reveal that the inappropriate father had not only frequented this sophisticated environment, but had created it from the beginning. I entered the main hall of the Golden Terrace at 8:40, when they were already in the middle of their meal. The atmosphere was elegant as always, with soft music and golden lights creating the sophisticated atmosphere I had planned so carefully 15 years earlier. My family was exactly where Carlos had told me they would be, at the center table, all impeccably dressed. Tyler was in a dark suit, Jessica was stunning in a red dress, and Marcus and Linda were also elegant. Little Emma was behaving like a little princess, obviously accustomed to refined surroundings. I walked slowly through the room, discreetly greeting other customers, local businesspeople who knew who I was, traditional families who had been coming to the restaurant for years. It was ironic that in the room where my own children thought I was inadequate, I was one of the most respected people. I stood near a marble column, where I could watch them without being noticed. They were absorbed in their celebration, toasting with expensive champagne, oblivious to the fact that the owner of the establishment was just a few feet away. Marcus saw me first. "Dad." His face showed genuine surprise. "What are you doing here?" The conversation at the table died instantly. Tyler turned away, Jessica looked visibly uncomfortable, and Linda lowered her eyes like a child caught doing something wrong. "Hi, kids," I replied calmly, approaching the table. "I came for dinner." "But, what do you mean?" Tyler stammered, clearly embarrassed. "You said it was fine not to invite you." "It is fine," I smiled reassuringly. "That's why I decided to come on my own." Jessica quickly composed herself, forcing a polite but tense smile. "Jonathan, what a surprise. But well, this place is kind of expensive, you know? Maybe you'd feel more comfortable at a restaurant more suited to your budget." "Suited to my budget?" I repeated, pretending to consider the remark. "It's just that the prices here are pretty steep," Linda added nervously. "Perhaps a simpler place would be better on your pocketbook." I looked around the dining room I had decorated myself, at the waiters I had personally trained, at every detail I had chosen one by one during years of meticulous work. "Actually," I said calmly, "I think I can afford to have dinner here." "Dad, you don't have to," Tyler whispered, clearly mortified. "We can pay for you if you want to stay." Pay for me. The irony of the situation was delicious. "Just this once," Jessica offered magnanimously, as if she were doing charity. "As a gift." At that moment, Carlos approached the table with his impeccable professional posture, exactly as we had rehearsed. "Good evening. Is everything perfect with your dinner?" "It's great," Jessica replied haughtily. "But perhaps my father-in-law would prefer a smaller table in a more private corner, so he doesn't feel intimidated by the atmosphere." Carlos looked at me discreetly, waiting for my signal. The moment had arrived. "Actually," I replied calmly, "I don't need a table." "What do you mean?" Ricardo asked, confused. "Because I own this restaurant." The silence that followed was absolute. I could see the expressions changing one by one, confusion, disbelief, then the slow recognition of the truth. "Carlos," I continued, keeping my voice calm, "these are my sons and daughters-in-law. The ones who thought I was unfit to frequent my own establishment." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Carlos replied with perfect professionalism. "Mr. Miller is an exceptional owner. He has turned this place into the most respected restaurant in Seattle." Jessica turned completely pale. Linda opened and closed her mouth, unable to speak. My sons looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time in their lives. Is that true?" Tyler managed to ask, his voice coming out as a whisper. "Completely true. For 15 years. But, how? Why didn't you ever say anything?" I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Because you never asked me about my dreams, children. You just assumed I wasn't capable of achieving them." The weight of the revelation hit them like an avalanche. Jessica looked around the elegant hall as if seeing it for the first time, slowly realizing that every detail she had admired so much had been created by the man she had considered inadequate. "You," Tyler began, but his voice failed him. "I set the standards of sophistication in this establishment," I explained calmly. "I train the staff on how to treat refined customers. I approve the menu you all admire so much." Marcus finally found his voice. "Father, we didn't know." "You did know. You knew I worked 18 hours a day building something special. You simply chose to believe that it couldn't be truly sophisticated." Jessica tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The woman who minutes earlier had offered me charity now found herself sitting as a guest in my own empire. I picked up the bill that Carlos discreetly brought me, on the house as always. "Dinner is on me," I announced. "Consider it a parting gift." As I signed the bill with the ease of 15 years of practice, my sons remained silent, digesting the magnitude of what they had discovered about the man they had underestimated for so long. The most devastating lesson of their lives was just beginning, because discovering who I really was would only be the beginning of the transformation our family would face going forward. In the days following that revealing night at Golden Terrace, the silence was deafening. Neither Tyler nor Marcus called me. No Sunday visits, no routine check-ins to see how I was doing. It was as if they needed time to digest who I really was. The first call came from Tyler 5 days later, his voice hesitant and broken. "Dad, can I come over? I need to talk to you." He arrived alone, without Jessica, without Emma. He sat in the living room where we had talked so many times, but this time it was different. He looked at me as if trying to decipher a riddle he had ignored his entire life. "Why never told me about the restaurant?" The question came out as a whisper laden with guilt. "Why did you never ask me about my life beyond the diners?" He was silent for a long moment, his hands shaking as he processed the magnitude of his own blindness. "Dad, we underestimated you. Completely." His voice broke. "I didn't know that you had ambitions. That you dreamed of things beyond making sandwiches. That you understood sophistication." "Tyler," I replied calmly, "you didn't just underestimate me. You were ashamed of me." The words fell between us like heavy stones. He lowered his head, unable to deny the truth. "Jessica is devastated," he continued, his voice barely audible. "She says she can't look at herself in the mirror anymore. And I feel like the worst son in the world." Marcus showed up the next day, also alone, visibly distraught. The conversation was similar, but he was more direct. "Dad, you made us look like fools." "No, son. You made fools of yourselves. But why hide it? Why not tell us about your successes?" "Because you didn't deserve to know." The words came out without cruelty, just as fact. "You treated me like an embarrassing relative. Why would I share my achievements with people who were ashamed of me?" Linda came to see me a week later, arriving at my house nervous and visibly regretful. "Father-in-law, I wanted to apologize. For everything. For treating you as if you were less intelligent, less capable." "Linda, you don't owe me an apology. You were honest about what you thought of me. Now I'm being honest about what I think of you." It took Jessica 2 weeks to show up. When she finally rang my doorbell, she looked like she had aged years in a few days. Her eyes were red, her face pale. "Jonathan, I have no words." She struggled to speak. "What I did was unforgivable. I treated you as if you were inferior, inadequate, when in fact I was the owner of the place you admired most in town," I finished. She collapsed in tears right there at the door. "How can you forgive me? How can any of us forgive ourselves?" It was interesting to observe how the family dynamic changed completely after that revelation. Suddenly, my opinion was valued again. When I talked about economics, they listened with genuine attention. When I suggested something about business, they considered it with respect. "Dad, could you teach us about restaurant management?" Marcus suggested during a hesitant visit. "I could, but you'd have to ask me with respect, not condescension." Tyler started including me in social events again, but now there was something different. It was no longer about tolerance or family obligation. It was about genuine pride. "This is my father, Jonathan Miller," he would introduce me now. "He owns the Golden Terrace." Most rewarding was seeing how my relationship with Emma changed. Without Jessica's artificial restrictions, our connection became natural and warm. "Grandpa, you're cooler than I thought," she told me one afternoon when I brought her to visit my office at the restaurant. "I'm not cooler, Emma. You just stopped underestimating me." But the deepest transformation was in myself. That night at the Golden Terrace wasn't just about humiliating my kids or proving my worth. It was about setting clear boundaries about how I wanted to be treated. I stopped seeking approval. I stopped accepting crumbs of affection. I established non-negotiable standards for our relationships. "Dad," Tyler said to me in a conversation months later, "you've changed. You're more steady. More confident." "I've always been this way, son. You just never paid attention." Jessica underwent a radical transformation. The arrogant woman who offered me charity became genuinely humble, almost to the point of excessive insecurity. "Jonathan, can I ask your opinion on something?" she began to say regularly, as if she needed my approval for everything. "Jessica, you don't need my permission to live your life. You just need to treat me with respect." The Golden Terrace continued to thrive, but now with a completely different family dynamic. My children brought friends and colleagues over for dinner, introducing me with genuine pride as the owner. Little Emma began spending weekends with me, learning about the business, watching how I interacted with employees and customers. She absorbed it all with the natural curiosity of a child who could finally see her grandfather as he truly was. "Grandpa, when I grow up, can I work with you?" she asked one Sunday. "Of course, sweetheart. But first you're going to study hard and discover your own talents." The most powerful lesson that emerged from this whole experience was about personal dignity. I discovered that self-love is not selfish, it's necessary. And that sometimes, in order to be respected, we need to stop accepting disrespect, even from people we love. 6 months after that eye-opening night, I hosted a family dinner at Golden Terrace. Everyone was there: Tyler, Jessica, Emma, Marcus, Linda. But this time, I was at the head of the table, not as a tolerated guest, but as a respected patriarch. "Dad," Tyler said during the toast, "I want to publicly apologize for underestimating you. For being ashamed of the man who gave us everything. And I," Marcus added, "want to thank you for teaching us that respect isn't something you automatically give. It's something you earn and keep." Jessica, holding Tyler's hand, whispered, "Jonathan, you taught us that true class has nothing to do with money or status. It has to do with character and dignity." I looked around the table, seeing my family transformed. It wasn't just about them respecting me, it was about them learning to respect the value of hard work, perseverance, and genuine humility. "The most important lesson," I said to everyone, "is that we should never underestimate anyone. Especially those who loved us unconditionally, even when we didn't deserve it." Today, 5 years after that transformative night, I run my culinary empire with pride, but also with the awareness that true success isn't measured in dollars or prestige. It's measured in the quality of the relationships we build and the integrity with which we live. Tyler took over the management of 2 of my restaurants, applying the lessons in humility he learned the hard way. Marcus expanded into corporate catering, always remembering where our family came from. Emma, now 8, still visits me on weekends, learning that real greatness comes from serving others with excellence. And Jessica? She has become one of the strongest advocates of what she calls authentic hospitality, the idea that true elegance comes from making others feel valued, not excluded. If this story of humiliation, revelation, and redemption touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories about how life teaches its most powerful lessons through the most unexpected situations. My name is Jonathan Miller, I'm 59 years old, and I've learned that being a father doesn't mean accepting any treatment from your children. It means teaching them to value us. And sometimes, for respect to flourish, we need to stop tolerating disrespect, even if it means revealing truths that will change everything forever. The last time I had dinner at Golden Terrace with my family, Emma asked me, "Grandpa, how did you know they would learn their lesson?" I smiled, looking around the restaurant I had built with so much love and determination. "Honey, sometimes people need to be confronted with their own smallness to discover their true greatness." In the end, it wasn't revenge. It was education. And the best education is always the one that teaches through experience, not through empty words.